Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday edition of the Hockey Podcast on Agree or Disagree the podcast. My name is Kevin Olenek. I'm here with Sean. Hello, Sean.
Hello.
And Tyler. Hello.
Hey, Kevin.
Usually we have a bit of a witty banter or something to start us off with, but it's been a pretty tough week here in Vancouver. For many in the Vancouver Canuck community, in the media community, and also probably in the broader scope of hockey this week. There are many that had opinions and have opinions about the Canucks. You can find them anywhere. But when Jason Botchford spoke, everyone, including media members, listened. They waited for his articles. They stayed up late after every game for either the Provies or what later became the Athletes. It takes a skill to both anger, challenge, and always entertain. And Jason Botchford had it. He was must-see on TSN That's Hockey. He was must-read and also must-listen. And on Wednesday, we learned that Botchford passed away quite suddenly from a heart failure. And it did send shockwaves throughout the Vancouver media market, and we're still reeling from this today. So it's with this in mind that we start. We will get into other hockey topics as it is this week, but we cannot really go on without talking a bit about Jason Botchford and the impact that he had on the Canuck community, on Tyler and Sean Moore as longer Canuck fans. So I guess we'll start there. Thoughts on Jason Botchford?
Jason Botchford was, for lack of a better term, the heart and soul of the hockey media in Vancouver, and was the voice of a very large contingent of the hockey fans in Vancouver and Canucks fans. The Provies and the Athletes were basically must read for anyone who followed the Canucks pretty regularly, and even for more fair weather fans or just casual fans, because he brought a passion that I don't think we've seen from a reporter. And it was multiple people have said this, but I think it's very apt. I don't think he was ever really a fan of the Canucks, but he was a fan of the Canucks fans, and he wanted the Canucks to do well because he was such a fan of the fan base and what it meant to him to see them happy and discussing different topics that he brought up or anyone else brought up.
For me, Jason Botchford was the guy that I think all other opinions were measured against. You know, he really set the tone for Canucks coverage. He did things his way. He wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers in the process. He was remarkable at connecting with the fans. I got blocked by him on Twitter a couple of times, and I guess that goes to show that just how much he was paying attention. You know, like the guy was really connected with the fans more than anybody else, and the outpouring that we've seen, I think, reflects that. But what really impresses me with Jason Botchford, and it's unfortunate I'm only finding out about this after the fact, but it's evident how much he helped other people aspiring to get into the sports media business. It's clear he was very gracious with his time and wanting to see others in the business succeed. And in a business full of egos, you don't see that very much. Just really shocking. 48 years old, wife, 3 kids, revered across the league. It's just another reminder for everybody how quickly life can come and go.
Yeah, it's excuse me. There were so many things that were swirling through my mind when I saw this, and I think in terms of most, I don't know if there was. I think a lot of fan bases have that voice, or hopefully have that voice that can speak for the fans. And it definitely was Jason Botchford in so many ways. And he spoke in a lot of ways like a fan. Like one of my favorite terms that he used was, "Who cares? He's 34." Like, it's just, when he was on the radio, he yelled and screamed a bit like a fan. When he had his battles with Dave Pratt, he yelled and screamed like a fan. He spoke like a fan. But he also had the knowledge of who to pick and who to speak to, and kind of get the pulse. Like, Jeff Patterson was saying he only spoke to 4 players on the Canucks all of last year. It was Pettersson, Horvat, and a couple of others. And that he understood who the pulse of the Canucks was. And it is amazing to know how much of an influence that he had on so many other people, like Canucks Army and Canucks like Ryan Beach and Tyler Shipley and Comets Corey, who have been on our John Jang talked about it, Sat Shaw, Scott Rintoul. He almost became he's almost like a grandfather for Vancouver sports media in so many ways. Just the influence that he's had. And he never took credit for it. He just was him. He did his thing, and just lived his life. And as I said, it just takes a special skill to not only to anger and challenge, but just really find a way to entertain in 3 mediums the way that he did. Because he must read. You always needed to read him. He always had something important to say. I remember when he was on That's Hockey. He was always a segment to watch, and when he was on TSN 1040, he was always someone that you wanted to listen to, and you couldn't turn away him. It's a real huge loss for the Vancouver sports community that he's gone suddenly and so quick. I think it's
the word passion, Kevin's been used with him quite a bit. And, you mentioned his appearances on TSN. He did Studs and Duds as a regular segment on That's Hockey. And, he just couldn't wait to hand out some duds, you could see it on his face how excited he was about handing out some duds. Just the enthusiasm he brought to all of his work was quite infectious.
Yeah, he was very, passion is a very good word. Very enthusiastic and very outgoing in how he approached his media. And you may not have agreed with a lot of what he said or how he said it, but you understood that he was very much a voice for a very big group of Canucks fans, because he was able to voice what they were thinking to a larger audience and in a better way than they could.
Yeah, it's almost like he was their conduit. Like he was able to question management in ways that other media members were afraid to. Like he pushed that button and challenged Benning in a different way. He challenged Gillis in ways that Mike Gillis may have gotten frustrated, but ultimately Mike Gillis deeply respected him. And you even hear sort of the respect even John Tortorella had for him when he started his press conference in Columbus on Wednesday. He started his press conference with talking about Botchford and Torts in the media. It's just never. That's just not a good thing. But for him to speak about Jason Botchford speaks highly about how well he was regarded.
Yeah, he was a game changer in the media as well, with the way he did with the Provies and the Athletes. Those after game articles became a staple of the Vancouver market. You had multiple different versions and takes of that, takeoffs of that style and post game articles. But no one was able to come close to what he did. And it's just one of those must-read articles that you needed to stay up and and read before you went to bed after a Canucks game.
Absolutely. There's the term for TV, destination viewing. Well, he was destination reading in an era where there isn't much of that anymore.
Yeah. And how he used social media, like how he was more than willing to connect with his audience. Like he never really let his celebrity, like he pushed the buttons. He challenged and argued with people, but his debates with Andrew Walker were well known, even though they were friends. But the way that he bantered, he wasn't afraid to go after anyone that was not part of the part of the competition or whatever. He just he just had a special skill that is very hard to find in this day and age.
Yeah, he and part of what made him so special was his willingness to engage and use social media in his articles. It made fans feel like they had. That was part of why he was a voice for the fans, is because he would include different things from social media and tweets from just the fan base and give them some spotlight for what they brought to the table.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like he invited everybody to like we were all at the pub, at Botchford's pub. We were watching the hockey game and Botchford was sort of like sharing the story of what everybody had to say at the party, And, yeah.
Well, that's basically what hockey Twitter and sports Twitter really is just a bigger version of you sitting around the table with your friends at the pub or sitting around on couches at someone's place watching the game and making comments. And what the Provies and the Athletics did so well was just bring that to a bigger stage, and Botch was the curator of that.
Yeah, he absolutely was. It's no question. I'm hoping there's more honor. I know that there'll be probably a lot of honors for him in terms of the draft, but I'm hoping that they put him in the Hall of Fame. I think as a writer, I hope that they honor the Hockey Hall of Fame honors him at least for that this year. But I don't know what else will be done. Were you going to say something, Tyler? Or?
No, and just other than he'll be missed, he'll be greatly missed.
Yeah.
And it's an official GoFundMe campaign from the Botchford family to help with the fees, and that are sorted with what happens after a sad event like this. So if anyone has the ability to chip into that, I think we should support that very, very vehemently.
Yeah. He is survived by his wife, Kara, and his three young kids. This is not an easy time. I know that there's going to be a private ceremony for friends and family only. And there was talk that there's going to be something they may in the future do something more public. His stepfather was John Wall, who's been on the Blue Jays beat for forever. He mentioned they may do something. So, and really, I think like you could again. The other people I forgot to mention in terms of Botchford's influence is Halford and Bruff, who are some of the more entertaining folks on Vancouver sports radio or Vancouver radio period nowadays. Excuse me. It's just I think it's just it's a big loss. It's a sad loss, and he's going to be missed immensely. As mentioned, we will put the GoFundMe link in the comments on here as well, because if you can support that would be great. Before we go on, do you have any other? Do you have a favorite Botchford moment that really kind of stood out for you, or?
Well, one thing I did some searching back through my first defunct Twitter handle, and I found out and realized that the first media member that ever responded to me and engaged me on social media was Botchford. And I look back and it's he hasn't really changed. He didn't really change much from back in 2012, 2013 to now, to when he passed. And he was still the very gregarious, loud and blunt person that we knew and people became very attached to.
One of the things that I appreciated most about Jason Botchford is I believe he was the one that penned an article about the Sedins at the end of their career, and I think just showed how much he really nailed it as far as the feelings of the fans towards the Sedins, and how he was able to speak to the rest of the hockey world about what the Sedins meant to Canucks fans. That one stood out to me. I know it's more recent than other things. I mean, I think if you ask people, what's your favorite Botchford moment, I think the colorful description about Joe Thornton potentially scoring 4 goals in a game, that one would stand out for people. But the way that he stood up for the fans, to other media commentary was always something that I think was great.
Yeah, and it was funny because apparently, with the Joe Thornton thing, every other media member was there and wasn't going to say anything, and it was only Botchford that brought that up. He was the only one that did. So, I guess to me it was always more the radio stuff. Like, not that his writing would, like, it was. I just always remember him and Pratt going at it, and I think I always remember when Pratt said. Something about Tom. It was something about Thomas Vanek. Vanek had a good game, and Botchford said, "Who cares? He's 34." It's just the way that he responded on air. It was so something. Like I can't imagine. Yeah, it's a tough time, but again, we will have the GoFundMe link to check out there, and we'll probably be talking a little bit more with some people that have been influenced by Botchford as the off season has gone on. But we'll go on to some other stuff here, and interesting news also on. Earlier this week as well regarding the WHL Bantam draft involving Canucks, involving Jet Wu. It was expected by many that he would have been traded to the Kelowna Rockets at the WHL draft because the Memorial Cup is in Kelowna this year. Or next year, not this year, in 2020. But he turned out to be traded to the Calgary Hitmen at the WHL Bantam draft. I think this is an interesting thing for a number of things. The Calgary Hitmen are obviously going to be going a little bit more all in than they were expected, obviously, to go for the Memorial Cup and WHL championship. But it also puts Jet Wu in an NHL caliber market. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that will help Jet Wu going forward? What are your thoughts there on that?
Well, Moose Jaw was going to be in a bit more of a rebuild mode after this season. There were a few players of the older players to graduating to the pro ranks. Having Jet Wu move into a team that's going to be a little more competitive is huge. He's going to go into, as you said, the Calgary market, and more. He's going to have a little bit more, I think, access to a little bit more off-ice assets that will help him going forwards, and I think it's going to be a very good move for him. I'm certainly excited because that means I get to watch him a little bit more this season. So I think it overall would be a very good move for Jet.
Yeah, hard to disagree with any of that. And just being in a bigger location, that I don't think that ever hurts a player that's got NHL potential. Get used to the brighter lights, the additional attention, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm on. Yeah, I think it's certainly going to help them. And the Hitmen play in the Saddle Dome, an NHL caliber rink for the most part. not saying that the Flames need a new arena, but whatever. It's an NHL caliber arena with NHL stuff, with NHL ice. So he'll get used to that. I think that will help. Bigger media market. And I think more ice time, and I think more will be expected of him too. So I think that will help his development. I'm not sure where they're going to be at next year in the WHL, where the Hitmen will be. We'll have to see about that. But if they can go on a pretty good playoff run, I think that will help Jet Roux. For him for sure as he goes in. So I certainly think that will be helpful. Let's not forget about the Vancouver Giants, who got off to a pretty good start last night against the Prince Albert Raiders, by the way, beating the Raiders in Game 1. The Raiders are highly favored in this series, but the Vancouver Giants, what team? The Vancouver Giants certainly took it to the last night. So, the WHL, it's good competition. He's going to be in a good area for Jet Roux, and it's going to be very interesting for him going forward, I think. The other big thing that caught everyone's attention in Vancouver Canuck land was an interview that Milan Lucic did on Sportsnet 650. And they asked him if he would consider being a Vancouver Canuck, which is a little odd to ask. Maybe a little odd to ask in some ways, considering he still has a ton of time left on that Edmonton Oilers contract. But he was open to the idea of becoming a Vancouver Canuck, and it led to some speculation and some possibilities of having an opening up this discussion. So let me ask you, would you trade Milan Lucic for Loui Ericksson?
No. He's older. He was never fast, and he's getting slower, and contract is 1 year longer. The Canucks are going to need as much cap space as possible 2 years from now, when they have Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes to sign, and with Loui Eriksson's contract ending at that summer, that's very good for the Canucks, and bringing in Lucic, who would be more of a contract anchor than Loui Eriksson, it's not good cap management and roster management for the Canucks.
No, I can't see that even being realistic, but no, I wouldn't do that as a one-for-one either, for the reasons that Sean outlined. It would be more reasonable for the Canucks if the Oilers were able to sweeten the deal somehow with retained salary, or throwing in a draft pick or a prospect or something like that. But they're not in a position to do any of those things. So if the only way that an exchange would work there is a one-for-one deal, I would turn that one down as well.
Yeah, so, the only way that would make sense from the Canucks standpoint is if either the Oilers retain a couple million on that salary because of that extra year, or the Canucks get a very good asset in return for taking on that extra year. And Milan Lucic would have a lot of bridges to repair in Vancouver to make it something that the fan base would be able to swallow.
How so?
Well, you look at how just everything that from 2011. I think it's just something that the Canucks fan base would never be able. I don't think as a whole would be able to look past, unless he basically. The way I put it on Twitter is that his contract can't be an anchor, so you'd have to be able to take a couple million off of that. He would have to come in and just basically embrace Vancouver for Vancouver. And he would have to do whatever. And I think some people said the first Boston Vancouver game, he'd have to punch Marchand in the face.
Not only the first one. He have to probably do that in the first four. He would have to actually go. He have to invite Brad Marchand down to Granville Street and punch him in the middle of the street there, I think, and then maybe he's got it. But
I would say I think it's more likely the fans are willing to forgive and forget than maybe Sean is stating now. Although, we're talking about this in 2019. If this were to come up a couple years from now, maybe the feelings change. I don't know. But at the end of the day, is he really a fit with the Canucks and where the rest of the team is at? That's the style they're trying to play. It just doesn't seem like it's a fit.
On one hand, I think I can see why there's interest in what Lucic could bring, because the sort of the old school hockey thinker is thinking, this is a guy that could protect a Pettersson, maybe, or protect a Besser. But you look how Connor McDavid is abused. You would think that Lucic would stop that, and that hasn't really happened. So I don't know how he's going to be protecting a Pettersson or a Besser in this day and age if he can't protect a McDavid. That's one thing. And I think. I think he's too slow for this team. I think he's too slow for this league. I think his salary is too much. I think there's a nice fantasy part to it. I guess that would be interesting, but I understand it. But I think in the long run, I agree. I think that the guy would seem to be more of a harm to where the team is going right now than in the future. Now, if the Canucks were maybe in more of a contender mode, I could see more of a consideration for it, maybe, but they're not in that position right now to really bring a guy like that in, I think.
Yeah, and his whole way and style was just perfect for the Bruins, and I don't see the Canucks getting to being that style of play ever.
Yeah,
and he's not, and that's not, and Edmonton's not like that either, and he just seems a little lost there much of the time.
Yeah, well, he's trying to keep up. He doesn't have the skating and the boots to keep up with Connor McDavid.
Yeah, and I think there was an expectation that he would be, from his perspective, whether it's right or not. I think that there was more of an expectation that he would be riding shotgun more with Connor McDavid than he ended up doing. And there's probably other factors for that. So, but I do wonder, like, in terms of, I think the other thing that maybe wasn't mentioned too much is I'm wondering if Lucic is kind of sort of suddenly hoping he's out of Edmonton this year, that he's not back into whatever that is. I mean, we'll talk a bit about their GM situation a little bit later, but I got the sense he's not super happy in Edmonton right now.
Well, it's very unusual as a player under contract to talk about playing for another team.
Yeah.
You mentioned that off the beginning of the topic here. It does make you wonder: is he trying to force a deal to get out of there, or what's the intent of that?
Yeah.
Or is he just trying to be honest with a Vancouver radio station? I mean, maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't know. Everybody likes the whole guy coming back to play for the hometown thing. We look at what it was like with Tavares signing with the Maple Leafs this past year, and how much fanfare there was with that.
Oh, sure. I'm sure that there's an excitement for it, but I think the reality and the practicality of that is another thing too. Now, the other side of this which also maybe didn't get as much concentration this week for a number of things, but it was what Loui Ericksson has said about Travis Green. And they certainly are not, from Loui Eriksson's perspective, they're not on the same page. He is feeling that Green is not using him properly. He's not being placed in ways that Loui Eriksson feels that Loui Eriksson can be effective. And it's been 2 years of Travis Green, and certainly Loui Eriksson has struggled to the point that we thought that after that healthy scratch, that would be the last time we would see Loui Eriksson during the season, but he ended up playing again. Did this give you a different perspective of Loui Eriksson? What did you think of that? Do you see that he has a point, or is this just a complete misfit?
I think it just was a bad signing because the game just like with the Lucic signing with Edmonton, the game's just gone past Loui. He's not. He can't. He doesn't think the game at a fast enough rate. His skating isn't good enough to keep up with the speed of the game, and especially with the system that Green wants to play, it's not a fit. Maybe he would be a better have better success on another team, but I don't see it being much different on any other team because of like I said, the speed of the game is just too fast for him now. He was never really a super skilled guy. He was more his best fit was when he was with Boston, and he was just a good garbage goal guy.
I kind of feel like the whole Ericksson comments about Travis Green things being a bit blown out of proportion here. I mean, first of all, should we be surprised by it? No. I mean, he was parked on the fourth line. He got a healthy scratch. I'd be surprised if the player didn't speak out and be frustrated with that, quite frankly.
Yeah, it was blown out of proportion a little bit, especially because it was a Swedish interview. So when you have the lost in translation bit, I think it comes across a little more blunt than I think than it probably was intended. But yeah, he definitely is probably just more frustrated than anything else with how the last season or the last couple seasons have gone.
My hope is that it's an indication he's going to come back and be extra motivated for next season, but we'll see.
Either that or he's willing to move waive his no trade clause to another team.
Yeah. I guess that's the interesting question, because I mean, there's teams like Ottawa that have to get to the cap floor. Florida will have to, depending on things, may have to get to the cap floor. I mean, they may or may not be signing a couple of guys. There's other teams I think that might find interest in him. I don't know what the trade value for a Loui Ericksson is, but maybe that's a statement in and of itself to say that he's A, willing to move out, and B, he's willing to give more of an effort to another team, that maybe you could get a little bit more than you think in terms of value for Loui Ericksson, which for me right now is a mid-round draft pick. I think is the best that you can get for Loui Ericksson.
Yeah. Plus, I think it'd be one of those addition by subtraction trades, if anything else, because I think giving someone else an opportunity to play in Loui Eriksson's roster spot, I think is something that I think is more valuable to the Canucks going forwards than anything else at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly going to be interesting to see about that, where that's going to go, because I think that will be one of the big off-season questions as the off-season goes on. What's going on? And then also, Mike Gillis has been on the radio for a number of different reasons. He was one that talked about Jason Botchford, but Aquilini said that he also did not talk to Mike Gillis about president of hockey operations. He also hasn't heard of Dean Lombardi either. He may not have heard of Ken Holland or Ken Dryden or any other legend, but whatever out there. Are we fantasizing? Let me ask it this way. Is there a part of the Canuck fan base that you think wants to see Mike Gillis back with the Canucks?
Oh, definitely. You can put me as part of that group. I think from what he did to the team that got them within a game of the Stanley Cup, and the everything the behind the scenes stuff that he did was ahead of the time. Using analytics to help make Ryan Kessler a better player. Using analytics and data to go to the NHL and get a more favorable schedule for the Canucks was something that no one else had done before, and I don't think it has done since. But he did whatever he could to try and make this team better. And he's, as I said last week when we were talking about it, he's gone around the world and talked to multiple different successful clubs and figured out why they're successful. And he's looked back at what he did wrong as the Canucks GM and president when he was, and I think if he's given another opportunity, he's going to improve on it.
I spoke last week about how it may be able to work if they brought him in to work with Jim Benning, and the two complementing each other in terms of their their strengths as managers. But I don't know. It just seems really, really long shot for Gillis to want to come back and work for the Aquilinis. I mean, I think it's they're pretty difficult ownership to work with. It would seem like,
I guess that's part of the problem. I think just that. I don't know. Like, there seems to be
here's the thing, Kevin. As long as the Seattle opportunity is still on the table for him, you got to think that's the job he wants.
Well, if you're Seattle,
a clean slate.
If you're Seattle, who would you rather? Okay, put your Seattle ownership hat on, and you had a choice between Mike Gillis and Ken Holland. If you're Seattle, who would you pick?
I think that's it depends. If it was me, I'd pick Mike Gillis just because I think that he has a fresh take on what a successful franchise would look like. But it all comes down to who makes that decision. Are they going to go with more of a quote unquote hockey guy in Ken Holland, or are they going to go with someone new who's going to bring a fresh take and I think has a better chance at replicating the Vegas Golden Knights success in Mike Gillis?
I don't have a good enough feel for the Seattle ownership group there to get a sense of which way they would lean. I mean, in terms of resume, Ken Holland would impress more than Mike Gillis. But, if they're looking for a forward thinker, a fresher name, so to speak, a guy with knowledge of the division that they'll be playing in, there's certain things there that you could see Gillis making sense for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But bringing it back to the Canucks, are we making a bigger deal about a potential search for a president than there actually is? Is this just more smoke than fire? Is this just more fan base and media wanting a bit of a change versus the actual reality of the Aquilini and Benning partnership is looking to have?
Yeah, I think it's more smoke than fire.
I think so too, but I think that there's a legitimacy of the smoke, though, because I think what they're seeing from Benning, while there's some strengths there, he's not. When the Vancouver Canucks were at the height of their success, guys like Gillis, guys like Vigneault, guys like even Kessler, Luongo, the Sedins, they mastered the media. Like, they were quotable, talkable talking points. They're really part of that Canuck villainous sort of impression from 2010 to 2013 was because those guys stood up and spoke for their team. And that's why they for a number of reasons, but part of it was that's where that villainous came from. Right now, they don't really have that character to really speak out for the Canucks. And that, you bring back to Jason Botchford here for a quick second. Botchford became that voice. And they don't really have that voice that is listening to the fan base or representing the fan Canuck Nation the way the Canuck Nation feels it should be represented. And I think also, and another thing is that like a guy like Trevor Linden could see the big picture. And I don't think that Jim Benning is a big picture thinker. I think Jim Benning can think in terms of draft. Jim Benning is fine. In terms of scouting, I don't doubt that Jim Benning has his strength. But is Jim Benning a bona fide NHL general manager that can lead a team to the playoffs? can he make that big on the chip decision at trade deadline to get the Canucks that would either that trade that would get the Canucks either A, in the playoffs, or B, not making that trade in the playoffs? I'm like, in the clutch, is Jim Benning that guy? And I just don't think Canuck fans, I don't think we see it. I think that's why Mike Gillis.
At the very least, fans are underwhelmed by the potential there. That's a clear, that's clear. Everybody feels that there's an underwhelming aspect to Benning's management capability.
I think in terms of the Canuck fan base, I think there's a split. I think there is a definite pro Benning camp because they see the Elias Peterson, the Brock Besser, the development of Bo Horvat, Quinn Hughes. Now they see the direction that they're going in, and a lot of this group, I think, is definitely our season ticket holders, and then you've got the more vocal group on Twitter, who I don't think are season ticket holders, but they definitely go to a lot of games, are looking for more. They understand that the Canucks are in the right direction, but they're looking for more, and they want to see more forward thinking that will help the Canucks take that next step.
Well, it's especially this year. I'm kind of surprised that this hasn't been talked about more. But you look at right now, there's the potential here. We've got at least one wild card team going into the Final Four. We'll talk about the Jerks in a bit. But we could have another one that's one win away, and we have two that are tied. Just the idea of actually getting into the playoffs in the National Hockey League and having an opportunity, it's getting in and seeing what can happen. I think that's the other thing that's intriguing. You don't have to finish first you don't even have to finish first in this league to have a shot at the Stanley Cup. You just have to get into the playoffs, really. And maybe that's where part of the frustration with Canucks thinking is like, if you just get in the playoffs, there is an opportunity to be had. Like, look at it this way. Look how look how well Pettersson and Besser dominated the Flames throughout the regular season. Like, Pettersson on this first shift scored against first time on ice scored against the Flames. They harassed the Flames for most of this year. You don't think that they could have at least taken them to 7 games? And you saw what Colorado did.
They would have definitely put up good competition. If they got in.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of that is you look at the teams that did get in and did surprise. It was a long process for them. That Carolina hasn't made the playoffs in a few years, and they've had a long process of acquiring more and more talent, and finally just got the right mix and went for it, and are able to go for it. You've got Columbus, who went all in, but they've been struggling to get past the first round and get that right combination. Colorado has been in and out of the playoffs. They were in a couple years ago and then missed the last couple. And it's very much you just have to continue to look forwards and not focus in on the one season until if you're going to do it, you have to go all in like Columbus did and just get as many assets as possible so you can have that. And that's something that Benning hasn't done. And it's something that I honestly I'd say that I missed when I first got into this discussion with about acquiring draft picks is their assets, and they're assets that can grow in value. While for the most part, if you acquire just another player, that player is not necessarily going to grow in value to other teams, and if they do, then he's probably not someone you're going to want to trade because he's helping your team.
Just in regards to Columbus going for it with the moves they made at the deadline this year, presumably they made a calculation there, right? They calculated, okay, this is the right time to go for it. And, their history of not getting past the first round, weighs heavily on that. I'm sure ownership is kind of, tapping the foot a little bit, getting antsy about things. But there isn't the same kind of outside pressure of impatience. Let's go, it's taking too long that you get in Canadian markets. So that's always a challenge in a Canadian market, is to keep pumping the brakes and preaching patience with the fans and getting the fans to buy into patience. That's difficult. Winnipeg's been able to do that. Now, some of that's, of course, because they lost the team before, so the fans are not going to now start bailing when things aren't going that well and they missed the playoffs, for a few years or whatever. But that's the challenge for Canadian teams, and I think the Canucks have done a pretty good job of managing the fan expectations as far as when are they going to get back to the playoffs.
I think fan expectations is huge, but I do think that the general fan is more educated on what is needed to become a good team, and we all want to see a cup win, not just make the playoffs and lose in the first round in 5, 6, 7 games. So I think had the Canucks been a lot more aggressive in the rebuild in the early years, I think where they'd be now, I think there would be a lot more patience involved in it, because the fan base would know that the team is in the right direction. And then at this point, I think the Canucks have done too many little middling moves where there's definitely a lot more impatience from a large vocal group of the fan base, where they want to see some forward thinking moves and not continually swapping out exchangeable parts.
Well, they're lower risk moves, I would say. Like, the more aggressive you are, the more danger there is of setting your franchise back. I mean, look at Edmonton, right? I mean, Peter Chiarelli was the most active general manager before he got fired, and he just kept setting the team back.
Yeah, but that was just some
really poor moves, obviously. But
some poorly conceived trades and moves, because you traded away skill for a position.
Yeah, but what's the underlying issue there? It's impatience, I think. Like they're antsy to, we got to get back in the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And like Toronto's made some really aggressive moves, and they're handing out money like crazy. And I mean, they still haven't gotten past the first round. So that is it. Now what? Now where do they go from here? Not to get on a big tangent, but like, they're aggressive moves, and we can and we will approach to signing everybody. It might not work for it though.
No, but I think with the way the cap is, you have to reach a point where you have to make that move, make a big aggressive move, and go for it, because once you have players on their second and third contracts, your cap space is very limited, and you have to start making sort of fringe moves. Like Pittsburgh has done really well doing it to win their last couple cups, just finding players that can play with their top players at a discounted rate. But right now with the Canucks, I think the issue is that we did, as going back to Botch again, we need an army.
Yeah.
They need more players. They need more skill. It's not just more middle six wingers that they have way too many of a glut of. They need an army of young players who can push the pace and push the level of play that the Canucks have.
Yeah, well, and with the draft in Vancouver, Kevin, I it'll be interesting to see if ownership kind of nudges betting and the management into doing a little more wheeling and dealing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, because I think it's a future topic that I'm wondering is it, and I'm certainly going to be looking forward to when we talk to our prospect analysts about, is it worth moving up or down in this draft, or even down to get more draft picks later? That's one thing. And do they have really the assets? Because Benning hasn't made that earth-shattering trade. Like, the biggest trade he made really has been Bonino for Sutter, really. I'm trying to think of anything else that was really blockbuster, and there really hasn't been. Like, he hasn't made that blockbuster move.
No.
That seems...
Well, yeah, outside of the first few moves he made when he first took over, having to move Ryan Kessler out, I would say that's the biggest move he's made, but that was kind of forced upon him.
Yeah. That, and I don't really. I mean, it's hard to grade Benning on that because that. Hi, Jim. Your first thing you need to do is trade a guy that only wants to go to one place. Good luck. Good luck to that. Yeah.
Well, if you look back at that trade, I think the return in a bubble, what he received that day was fine.
Yeah.
Is the death by a million cuts where he just continued to whittle away that return and it just didn't work because he turned Bonino into Sutter and he turned McCann into Goodbranson.
And Spiza was lost to the expansion draft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I believe one of the picks acquired in that deal was used to acquire Derek Dorsett, I think, and of course Dorsett ended up being forced into retirement with the head. What, it was a head neck situation. I'm forgetting now here, but forced into retirement due to injury.
Yeah, I think that pick was maybe I can't remember if it was that or. One of the picks they got for Jason Garrison. So, but yeah, it was just because again, like say, going back to why I think there's some impatience in the fan base is had Benning come in and just settled on the returns he got for Jason Garrison and Ryan Kessler and use those picks to pick players and keep them and develop them and have the patience to do so, he would continue to acquire picks as assets that you can use to acquire players later, or because he's as we said, one of the best things he does is the amateur scouting in the draft, and he just doesn't add picks.
Yeah.
So had they done that at the beginning, because what we're seeing right now is that we've got the top end talent, but we don't have the younger middle area talent that can support that the Petterssons, the Hughes, the Horvats, the Bessers, while this team grows. And as we go back to one of the major talking points for the Canucks this year was the lack of development of young players in Utica. Well, this is just year one of the first time that the Canucks have had any sort of top end talent that have played there, because the rest of it's been either prospects that have been acquired via mid to late round picks or free agency that have really done anything out of Utica. And now that you've got Cole Lind and Jonah Gadjevich, a couple second round picks going in there, and not seeing the development that the fan base wanted, you're seeing some questions pop up that whether or not the Canucks know how to develop players.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. When you're not winning, everything is under the microscope, and it becomes the guy at the helm, and the guy at the helm is Benning, and like this all comes down to how he's handling things, and part of it is he's not good with media, and part of it is what we've been talking about too. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see these next couple of months once the Stanley Cup Finals are over, or even before, because that Goodbranson-McCann trade happened before. Once there's some movement here, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Benning going forward for sure, and what the Canucks are going to do. And there's a lot of ways that they can do, but I do think you're right, Tyler. I think that there's going to be some pressure on him to make that quote unquote earth-shattering move, but he's got to be smart about it. for sure. He's got to be absolutely smart about it.
Well, if we go back to a few drafts ago, when they drafted Ole Ulevi, had Pierre-Luc Dubois dropped to number 5, they weren't going to pick. The Canucks weren't going to pick. They were going to trade that for PK Subban. So he's tried. He's tried to make that bigger shattering move, but things just haven't worked out. And with Nashville potentially needing to shuffle around some contracts to open up cap space for contracts that are coming due, the name of PK Subban has popped up again. So maybe he goes back to the well and tries to work another deal.
One thing that helps is quantity of picks. I know a lot of them are in the later rounds for the Canucks, but quantity of picks in this draft should help them. Should help make deals happen should they decide to do that.
Now, do you see a Subban helping here?
I think so. Yeah, he's one thing that the Canucks definitely need more of is better puck moving defensemen. And if you can bring in someone who's very adept at that and can produce points from the blue line, I think that's going to help huge, because I think there definitely is an issue of the Canucks not being able to get out of their own zone because they are, and not having the puck enough.
And on the power play, I mean, he's still, he offers that big shot. Like the Canucks used to have that with Sami Salo, and it was such a, really increase the dangerousness of the power play, and you would help in that regard, I would think.
Yeah. But I think that'll be an interesting name. And he's certainly an interesting guy. I think, and also too, I think he's a very interesting guy that I think he would fit well in this market. I think as well, but certainly interesting. So there's a job opening in Edmonton. I'm not sure if you two have applied or not, but it has the best hockey player in the world according to everybody, but yet no one seems to want this job. There was a job offer given to a guy named Kelly McCrimmon, and he is now becoming the general manager of the Vegas Golden Knights. Apparently the offer has been given to Ken Holland, although there's some Oiler fans that are scratching their heads over this and aren't sure about this, although we talked about Ken Holland a little bit earlier. But they haven't been able to solve this. First of all, is Ken Holland the right guy for the Oilers? And second of all, why has it been so hard to fill this job, especially if you have a guy named McDavid Connor on your team?
I think Holland is the right person if he's given the autonomy he needs to run it. And then that word autonomy is why it's been so hard to fill, because I think there is the Daryl Katz and his group of ex-Oilers that he goes to and gets advice from are going to meddle in the whoever takes over that role's business. And I think that's just why it's so hard to fill this role, because you don't know how much power you're going to actually have once you take over that role.
Yeah, and specifically on style of play, like if all the other voices there keep preaching the offense first mentality that they seem to keep employing, and you bring in somebody that wants to build from the net out, I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very clear Edmonton's not that concerned with building their defense and goaltending. It's just never been like that.
Well, that, and they don't really you look at their cap situation and their roster situation, there's not much stuff they can move around to create cap space to acquire someone that can help on the blue line or fix that goalie issue. So it's, despite having Connor McDavid, it's tough to really say, do they have the right pieces that can help whoever comes in create a team that can take the next step, make the playoffs consistently, and become a Stanley Cup contender.
Yeah, and it's tough because as ridiculous as some people thought that it was, their most tradable asset to get anything could be the guy that scored 50, almost when the Rocket Richard and Leon Draisaitl. And I know that Oiler fans are like, that's a ridiculous idea. You don't want to trade Draisaitl. But what else do you have there that could legitimately, without trading Connor McDavid, what else is out there that you could, on that team, that you could legitimately trade to get anything of value on this team at this point?
Well, yeah, exactly. The only players of value they have are McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins, really.
I'd throw Nurse in there as well. I think he'd be attractive to some other teams looking to add to their defense. But, yeah, not much. I mean, in terms of quantity, you'd have to assume Draisaitl would net the biggest return, outside of McDavid, obviously.
Yeah.
But Nurse, though, he's part of the solution on the blue line, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's you're starting with the one piece there.
Yeah.
So it's just and if you trade one of those one of those three up front, you're going to be immediately just it's going to be a tough pill for the fan base to take after seeing Taylor Hall go for Adam Larson and that not working out. Jordan Eberle going for Ryan Strome and that not working out, right? So it's got to be that trade if you're going to move like a Draisaitl or a Nugent Hopkins. You can't be a 1-for-1.
Yeah,
No.
I suspect that fans are with the Oilers are ready to swallow that pill. If our friends there at the Oilers YYC podcast are any indication, and they keep using the phrase "break the cycle," they did need to find a way to break the cycle. Well, bringing in a new general manager that's willing to make any move would be one way of doing that.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting. I think a guy like Holland is a veteran that can bring in would be a reasonable voice in Edmonton. He knows how to he's developed Steve Yzerman. He has won cups before. He probably would be wise in picking a coach for this team. But the question, I think you're right. I think the question is who is Daryl Cates going to listen to? Is he going to listen to the old Oiler Boys Club or a guy that has done it before? And if you're Ken Holland, unless you don't get what you want, you can go down the road down the West Coast, and Seattle's not far from home, and you will get the autonomy that you want to build the team that you want, and with a heck of a lot less pressure. So, I guess it really, at this point, Ken Holland holds all the cards. But if they don't hire Holland, I think the thing that's going to be really intriguing is not who they pick as GM. Who the heck is going to coach this team?
Oh, I know it's. I'm guessing there's going to be somebody off the board there. I just have a hunch. I don't know why I have that hunch. I think it'll be something off the board.
Yes, it'll certainly be interesting.
Because I think they'll want a namer for the manager, but they'd be more willing to go outside the box on the coach.
If it was me, I think the perfect Oiler coach is the guy that they never gave a true chance to. If I was the GM, I would be contacting Ralph Krueger. I think he'd be one of the guys I'd be contacting, but
yeah. Does he want to come back though? Yeah, that's the thing, right?
Does he want to be in that mess? So we have our first team in the Final Four that have entered, and of course, like everyone predicted in their early Stanley Cup playoff bracket when they faced the Washington Capitals, it was the Carolina Hurricanes. We had all that figured out. So how does a team with not a very good power play, not very good penalty killing, using a backup goalie, and having a bunch of injuries and a bunch of names that you would use in NHL 19 draft creative players, get to the Final Four?
They're just they came together. They're working hard and a little bit of luck. That's what you kind of need when in the playoffs, as we were talking earlier. Sometimes you just need that right chemistry and that right, just give them a hell attitude and something to rally around.
Feels like they've caught lightning in a bottle. Everybody's believing. They got great leadership there with Justin Williams. He brings a lot of credibility to that locker room with his Stanley Cup pedigree and his clutch play in Game 7s. Rod Brindamore has really come into his own as a coach. It's really important for teams to have the coach and the captain on the same page. Is there a team in the NHL that has the coach and the captain more on the same page than Carolina right now? It's very cohesive looking there right now, and they're hungry. They've got guys that are trying to prove themselves, and they're look where they are now. It's amazing.
They've also had such an underrated blue line for a couple of years now. And even still today, I think that people don't realize how good Jakob Slavin is. Brett Pesce, adding Dougie Hamilton, I think, added a little bit more of an offensive flair to that team. And Justin Falk's really good as well. So, and then they've just been really good at adding good skilled players and adding some speed and some grit to that to surround them.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's really amazing. I make jokes, but there actually is. They were 6th in goals against this year. There is some real legitimate NHL talent. Like Sebastian Aho is a legitimate top 3 forward in the National Hockey League. Svechnikov is going to be something. Justin Falk, Teravainen. They do have a lot of. They made a really. You talk about making trades. We talk about the acquisition of Nino Niederreiter has really helped. They got excuse me. They got a good chemistry. I think that they also fed off this bunch of jerks. They fed off the bunch of jerks moments here. I think that kind of united them. I'm not in some ways just sort of having fun at their home games, creating this atmosphere. There's no pressure on them. Brindamore has a cup. He knows how to win, and they've made some pretty shrewd moves, and they took advantage of a situation where, if this series was on Long Island, I think it would have been a little bit different in terms of atmosphere.
Absolutely.
But they took advantage of that. The Washington Capitals couldn't put them away. They found life, and, they're kind of sticking together, and whoever they play next is not going to find it easy to take them out.
That, and for some reason, the Carolina Hurricanes, when they make the playoffs, they go far. They've made the playoffs now 4 times since 2002. They were the Stanley Cup finalists in 2002. They won it in 2006. They were into the conference finals in 2009, and they're off to the conference finals in 2019. It's just quite the since 2002 they've made the playoffs 4 times, and they're at least making the conference finals in all of them.
Yeah. So it's actually not bad. There you go. You get in. You gotta every few years you got a shot, right?
The fans get their money's worth on those rare playoff appearances. It's not a quick one round and done situation.
Yes. And they've always had kind of the interesting characters there, Artur Zerbe, and they've always had the fascinating characters on their teams too that have made them watchable. Now, I guess the criticism about Carolina is they're not really that hockey star market but watching last night, that fan base, to me, I was pretty impressed. They were into it. Are they is it like Toronto? Are they packing Hurricane Gardens or whatever? I don't know about that, but the fan base that is there is really into it.
Yeah, whatever your thoughts on the storm surge and all that is, what you have to look at is that they've created a really great atmosphere and a fun atmosphere that has garnered them more fans and has helped them. It's probably spurred the team on even more because you see that atmosphere and want to give these fans the storm surge that they want.
I mean, I'll say this about American hockey fans. They can go dormant during the regular season and stretches where a team's not very good, but boy, do they know how to fan when the team looks good. And see this in Dallas too. It's pretty sparse during the regular season, but I mean, the American Airlines Center in the playoffs is one of the greater looking atmospheres from me just watching on TV around the league.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the numbers in the U.S. for hockey are some of the strongest. So as much as everyone in Canada has been like, oh, I don't know what we're going to do here with no original six or no Canadian teams, it's doing well in the U.S. So that's a good thing.
Definitely. Just a quick shout out to Hamilton the Pig. Carolina is 6-0 with him in attendance, all in these playoffs. Hamilton the Pig.
Way to go, Hamilton the Pig. And that's not Dougie Hamilton, by the way. It is an actual pig. We're not trying to insult Dougie Hamilton.
No. This is an actual pig named Hamilton.
Yeah. So I mean, and it's going to. And I think the other thing too with the other three series, they have the potential to go at least 6 or 7. Colorado's giving San Jose a fight. Columbus and Boston are giving each other a fight. Marchand's giving everybody a sucker punch. Marchand's being Marchand. It's just touching. And Dallas is playing St. Louis really tough.
Yeah, it's a fun playoffs to watch with all the different. No one's really taking the bull by the horns other than the Carolina Hurricanes right now.
Yeah. It's certainly I mean, I kind of thought San Jose could put Colorado away a bit quicker, but Nathan McKinnon's right now the best player playing hockey right now. I'm not saying he's the best player in the world, but he's giving San Jose fits, and Columbus is giving Boston everything that they can handle for sure. But it's going to be interesting. We'll talk about the NHL Players Association, and in combination with women's hockey, as there was a announcement today that there would be a boycott of women's hockey, playing women's hockey in North America this year. And the NHL's put out a statement this morning, and it said this: the NHLPA has encouraged that the players are taking an active role in the future of women's professional hockey. Their voice is important to ensure the continued growth of the game, and their judgments need to be respected. And this statement has been generally quite panned by the hockey world. As just tweeted here as a response, there's a picture of Bart Simpson with a cake saying, "At least you tried," and they throw the cake in the garbage. Next one, did you write this using predictive text? Stephen Colbert, that's it. I guess what should the NHL Players Association be doing here?
See, this is such a tough subject because we all want to see the women's professional hockey thrive and survive and thrive, and to have these players be able to make enough money to support themselves while they're playing. But at this point, it's tough because they don't have enough support from the NHLPA and the NHL to get off the ground and support the players until the money starts flowing in. And it's one of those chicken or the egg, cart or the horse arguments right now, I think. And as much as we all want it, until they get some corporate sponsorships and some and more viewers on the product, it's going to be tough for them to have a league that pays them enough to be able to have a living wage.
My feeling on this whole situation is, I commend the ladies for taking, a hard stance and really believing in the cause and all that, but they're not really, to me, in a leveraged position to be doing this. So I don't know how this is going to work out. I think everybody would like to see the NHL hand over boatloads of money and make this just happen, but that's not typically how the NHL does things. They carefully research opportunities that are good money makers for the NHL. The NHL has left they're not participating in the Olympics currently for financial reasons, right? So I don't know where this goes from here. The ladies obviously have to do something to try and save their game as a professional sports entity. But the NHLPA putting out a statement, in support. It's just kind of lip service. You need to actually have namer NHL players come out in front of the cameras and demand, real support with real dollars. And until we see that, I don't know where this is going to go.
Well, then, like I said, it's cart before the horse or chicken or egg. For me, I think one thing that they need to, the ladies need to look at is how to do things differently to get more eyes on the product and get more support from the public. Because right now, you're basically asking for support for something that a lot of people don't necessarily care about or have the want or need to watch or support. There's some support out there, but I wouldn't say it's very much in the forefront of people needing to. There's enough support to create the conditions that they're looking for. I think the best one to look at, comparisons to look at, are the National Lacrosse League and the CFL, where the majority of the players have to have second jobs in the off season to make things meet. And I think they need to look at those leagues and figure out how those leagues are surviving and supporting their players, and go from there. And then work on growing the game and growing the product that they're trying to put out there before they are expecting handouts from the NHL and the NHLPA and corporate sponsorships. Because at this point, as Kevin said, the NHL and anyone that is going to help out has to look up for themselves first and not just throw money at them and hope for the best.
So I want to go back to when we had Mitch on, and we talked a little bit about this, because his Sean, you weren't on for this, but I'm sure you listened. But Mitch talked about from his perspective, because one of his instructors is involved in all of this. Is it the quality of the game, or is it the promotion of the game that is the bigger issue here?
I think it's more the promotion of the game, because the quality of the game, people go out and watch junior hockey. They'll go out and watch Alberta junior hockey and BCJHL and WHL, and I think it's on par with that. But the reason we go and watch that is because we're watching the future of the NHL. I think it's the reason for that. And what the ladies need to start trying to support, pushing hard, is you're watching the future of the Olympics here. Because people will stop and watch the semifinals and finals of the women's hockey in the Olympics, but they won't go out and watch these other ones. It's the same issue with a lot of the other Olympic sports as well. But you need to find a way to get past that stigma and show how good the product is.
Yeah, and I mean the Olympic finals the last couple of times have been wildly entertaining games.
Absolutely.
So at its highest level, I mean the product. There's no concern with the product at its highest level. It's just it's holding that attention span between Olympics is difficult, and something that we see with the other Olympic sports as well. But sponsorship and promotion and belief from the mainstream television outlets that helps. I think in the U.S., NBCSN's doing what it can to try and promote women's hockey. They've got AJ Malesko there doing lots of games. They got Kendall Coyne Schofield doing some games now. I mean, they're trying what they can to promote the product, but there's only so much that they can do.
Yeah, it comes down to it comes down to what they're doing themselves, and it is interesting. I mean, I've said it. I think that if it's part of a hometown hockey package or it's part of something like that, I think it has an opportunity to get there. And I think also you're right, Sean. I think promoting this as like your future Olympians, I think has the ability to do something there as well. And maybe they need to and also I think finding alternative ways of media as well, I think would help as well. But I think that people are generally impressed with the product at a junior level. But hopefully something turns out of this. I mean, other than Sidney Crosby jumping in and saying, look, we need women's hockey, or Connor McDavid saying, look, we need women's hockey, I'm not exactly sure what the NHLPA can really truly do to help.
I think what really needs to happen now is for a discussion to happen like we're having here and going, all right, how do we get past the level that the women's hockey is at now and get it to the level where they can play professional hockey for 6-8 months of the year and make a living wage, right? So it's one of those things where instead of taking a stand and throwing your arms up and throwing a little bit of a hissy fit, which is what a lot of people see this as, it's continuing to make discussions and put good pressure on the NHL and NHLPA and their corporate sponsors to help support the growth of women's hockey and create a league that can be something that women and girls can strive to play in, like the NHL and is for men, for boys.
Yeah, and then good work at the grassroots level is important as well. Like getting namer women's hockey players out into smaller communities and doing camps and trying to inspire young girls to get into the sport and stick with the sport. I mean, all those kinds of things are important as well. And I know that goes on, but it's just it's not in the spotlight. There's just not much attention given to that.
And I think that's part of what I think. I don't know the whole details of all that, but from knowing what a lot of my friends have done when they went out for field hockey going to Europe, they never played top level leagues. They would play in the second or third divisions, and they could still make a living because they were paid enough to go out and play and train. But they also had to put work in elsewhere, coaching and running those camps for the juniors. So maybe that's just something that needs to be built into these contracts and all that, so that they understand that this isn't until they can get to that next level. You just have to put that little extra work in to do that, to make enough money to train and do that. Because I think that's even what a lot of the skiers, the speed skaters, all those Olympic sports that don't get the all the sponsorships and all that, they do whatever they can to make it work in terms of hitting all their World Cup events and all that. So I think it's something where I think what they're looking for, in my opinion, is I think it's too much at this point. But I think there is a good middle ground that's going to make things work for both the women and a league that can support them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do think I'm glad that the conversation about where women's hockey is out there, and I precursor and recognize that there's 3 white males having a conversation about women's hockey, and there's probably some people are like, can we have a female perspective, and that's fair, but I think we're just looking at this from a big picture perspective. We all want it to succeed. It's just, I think that there needs to be some tweaks and some things that happen there. I mean, I got to tell you, like, I've highly, just on a side note here, I've highly enjoyed Kendall Cole in Schofield on the Dallas St. Louis. I think she's on the coverage. I think she's brought in a really good insight. I think she's caused me some. Each time she talks, I keep remembering her at the All-Star game, and I think her and Cassie Campbell, their insights, I think, are helpful. It's going to take time, and I think a number of faces and voices just continuing to talk. And I would love to see like people like Kate Burness and Tessa Bonholm speak a little bit more about women's hockey. I think that they would be valuable voices. But it's going to take time.
Yeah, it's going to take time, and I think the more discussions we have, or the better, and the more pressure we put on Michelle to support it more, the better. Because all this talk about what the women need to do to create the league and all that, but it is good. But the NHL does need to support them more. The $100,000 that they put towards the 2 leagues and now the 1 league is not enough.
No, that's barely one human being's salary for a year, like legitimately living wage. That's not enough. You're absolutely right. They can give more. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. And they certainly have the wherewithal to give more. But it's a matter of what you do with that wherewithal as well. But,
yeah, and I think that's something that I think what the NHL is looking for is for the league and the women to step up and show where the growth can happen and where the money can come back at some point. Because otherwise, you're just throwing money down the drain for quote unquote nothing. I don't believe it is, but that's what they'll look at it as.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up there. Again, the GoFundMe page we will have there for the Jason, if you want to contribute to the Botchford family as for their needs and all that. We'll have that linked there as well. And there is, just to be aware, there is a number of GoFundMes that were started, but the one that we have is going to be the one that is specifically was started by the Botchford family. So the recommendation that has been mentioned is that's the one to give to. Not that because we know that money is going there. And with GoFundMes, there could be always some sticky points as well. And also just to be aware with GoFundMes, there's also a cost to put up a GoFundMe. So when you're giving, put that into your consideration a little bit as well. Anything else we need to touch on?
Oh, I think we had a good discussion today.
We did.
Absolutely.
So next week, what do we have going on?
We've got Derek Neumeyer coming on to talk about the upcoming draft, as well as a look into the Dallas Stars, and more specifically Justin Dowling, who grew up here in Calgary, Cochrane area. And personally, I've been following his career for a while because he played with my brother. So I thought it'd be fun to have him talk about his career, because he spent 400 games in the AHL and is now playing third, fourth line minutes for the Dallas Stars in their playoffs.
Cool. All right. And yeah, we will have that. And how do we follow you, Sean?
At Beardy Canucks 03 on Twitter.
And Tyler?
And I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
And I'm at KVOLE. And remember, everyone, we need an army. And bro and sis, do your deeks. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye for now.